Ranking UFC fighters. This is a task that I've been on now for the last few years, and is something you guys still seem to be excited about as well. Of course, if you're watching this video, you most likely have seen the last 3 installments of this series on our quest to show through numbers who the best fighters are. But for those that are new, for the last few years, I have been working on a UFC Elo Engine, where essentially, the UFC Elo Engine is a mathematical way to rank every fighter based on their supposed skill. This is the same system that chess.com uses, that esports use to rank their players and create matchups. It can be used for statistical models to predict outcomes of sporting events, genuinely just having so many purposes. I do highly recommend, if you haven't, go watch my first video on what Elo is and how it works. A lot of new people were a bit confused last video, but my first one explains it, and it kind of goes more in depth of what I basically just yapped about for the last 20 seconds. Anyways, with the project being 2 years old now, we have done a decent amount of things with the Elo model already. We investigated Elo peaks, what happens with changing the formula a bit to account for finishes. We have created graphs and visualizations for Elos over time, but there is one more thing that I have not covered quite yet, and that would be... This is actually quite an interesting task if you think about it. You may think it's simple enough to just sort fighters. Oh, you're this weight class, you go here. However, there are some weird issues you run into. For example, take a fighter like Max Holloway. Max has competed both at featherweight and lightweight. People consider him to be the featherweight GOAT. However, if you didn't know, his highest Elo came after beating Justin Gaethje at UFC 300, which was a lightweight fight, not a featherweight fight. So this begs the question, is it fair to use this number and still rank him as the #1 featherweight? Again, this isn't really an issue if we want to just have individual fighter rankings, which is what we've only really been doing for the last few years. But when we take a look at weight class Elo, who is the GOAT at every division thing, this raises a lot of problems. Elo is kind of continuous in a way. It doesn't, of course, sort based on weight classes, it just mathematically computes a score for each fighter. So how do we put Max in comparison against other lightweights? Do we take away his featherweight Elo and just count him at lightweight? Do we rank him in featherweight and lightweight? His peak Elo didn't come at featherweight, so it's all complicated. So many of these problems arise. If you're still confused, another easy example is Jon Jones. He already has one of the largest Elo counts at his light heavyweight tenure end, but then he had 2 fights at heavyweight. So if we make a heavyweight ranking, he's at the top of that because he's at the top of the overall rankings. So yeah, that's kind of a big issue, especially for seeing rankings by weight class. So how might I go about this? If a fighter moves from featherweight to lightweight, should his rating move with him? Fully? Partly? Not at all? The very first thing that came into my head is using averages in some way. Like literally the concept you learn in elementary school. And I'll explain how we use this, but I think it's best explained with an example from earlier. Let's look at Max Holloway again. So Max Holloway, featherweight all his career until his first lightweight fight in 2019 in his second meeting against Dustin Poirier. Up until that fight, Max Holloway had an Elo of 1252.44. One of the highest featherweight Elos ever. He then fought and lost to Dustin, putting him down to the 1230s, and then after that kept switching between feather and lightweight. But here's the problem. If we just copy his Elo from featherweight to lightweight, that raises the question of, is this even really fair to do? He's in a new division. Of course for individual rankings, sure, but not for seeing division by division. So maybe instead of using 1252.44 in our equation, what if we instead take an average between 1252.44 and the division average Elo at the time of the fight? So all that summed in a nutshell, we will have a featherweight Max Holloway in the featherweight rankings and a lightweight Max Holloway in the lightweight rankings. 2 Elo scores independent of each other. Now if we do that across the UFC, it should in turn be able to give us an objective weight class by weight class ranking of every fighter. Aljamain Sterling won't be ranked as a top featherweight all time, Jon Jones not the best heavyweight of all time, and etc, etc. Also on a more technical note, for this I just use the regular Elo math and engine. I know comments have been telling me to use the Glico system, and I don't really want to go into math of why I'm not, but it's basically just stuff with the uncertainty and volatility that just make things a bit too complicated because UFC fighters only fight like twice a year. However, doing this new independent fighter by weight class method, it actually led to a lot of pretty interesting results. For example, Rafael Asunko is a top 6 bantamweight, outranking people like Dominic Cruz and Corey Sandhagen, which that doesn't really seem right. Darren Elkins outranks peak featherweight Connor and Jose Aldo. So yeah, there's a few issues with how this is working at the moment, but there's still improvements that we can do. One feature you guys have been calling for is adding an Elo boost for championship fights. If a fighter is in a championship fight, they gain or lose more Elo. I actually like this idea from the inception of the project, so what better time to add this than now? For a championship fight, you can now gain 10 extra Elo points, but if you lose, you will lose more Elo. It's like a higher stakes kind of thing. Before I dive into the actual weight by weight Elo rankings, I thought I would share the top 5 using this new method. At number 1, we have light heavyweight John Jones. This shouldn't be a surprise in any of the 3 videos, he's been number 1. At number 2 is welterweight GSP, then welterweight Usman, lightweight Islam, and Anderson Silva at 5th. So, already off to a pretty solid start here. Starting with the smaller of the bunch, the flyweight division actually has the lowest number of athletes in the UFC all time, with 160 athletes competing at some point in their UFC career. Of course, the top here shouldn't be much of a surprise. There is one man we all unanimously call the GOAT of this division, Demetrius Johnson. At the number 2 spot, I do believe this man has earned this spot to be number 2 all time in flyweight. He is the second most title defenses of this division, and I'm sure that you could guess. The other top spots actually I don't think are a surprise either. Joshua Van now running out the top 3. So yeah, starting off pretty realistic in my opinion. Going on to the current flyweight Elo rankings, using this new method, we actually have the current champ at the number 1 spot, and Pantoja is number 2. Surprisingly as well, Kyoji is in 3rd, making his comeback within recent years. As far as the other rankings go though, again, I wouldn't really call any of these a surprise. Even the guys that aren't in the top 15 like Eric are still pretty close in Elo anyways, so I mean it just goes to show that anyone in the flyweight division could beat each other on any given night, I think. Moving up the pecking order now, onto the 135ers. This is the 3rd most competed in male division, with 336 athletes competing at some point here. This one I do find a little interesting actually. According to this new Elo model, we have Aljamain Sterling being the top of Bantamweight, with his training buddy not too far behind. The top 5 is about what I would expect from how this whole model works and everything. Again, I probably should restate Elo is technically a way to measure skill based on head-to-head results, but I mean it's pretty solid. Rafael Sunkau I think is still a bit high, and another thing I think people may ask is why is Dominic Cruz so low? But I think that just comes down to the fact almost half his career is in WEC, which isn't reflected in the Elo Engine. And for the current rankings, as expected from the peak rankings, we do have Merab at the top, with the current champ still sitting pretty in 2nd, about 1 more victory away from taking that top spot. The rest of the top 15 is pretty valid in my opinion too. Sean, Umar, and Mario Bautista sitting comfortably in the top 3 to 5 spots. Corey Sandhagen is up there as well. Yeah, I mean, I think the math did good here, so let me know what you think about it. Similar to the case of Dominic Cruz, arguably there should be a man who I would have thought had the highest Elo here. However, the person sitting atop featherweight is my favorite cooking TikToker actually, and Alexander Volkanovski. The person I thought would be at the top in Jose Aldo is sitting in 6th, not even in the top 5. I do find the other rankings to be fair actually in terms of skill of these fighters, but yeah, Jose Aldo landing in 6th obviously is a bit interesting. However, we also have to consider the fact that Aldo spent a lot of time in WEC as well before the UFC, so maybe this is a calling to eventually add WEC results to the Elo Engine. And of course, we have Volk at the top of all-time Elos for featherweights, so naturally he's still in his top spot here. Also well reflected in comparison to real life, Mosvar and Lerone Murphy being within the top 3. Mosvar just beat Lerone as well, pushing him even closer to the top. Yeah, I mean, another weight class, like I think the math did pretty good here. Okay, and now for lightweight rankings. This might honestly be one of the more interesting divisions for the whole video. Lightweight has always kind of been seen as one of the deepest divisions just ever in UFC history, and I think the Elo rankings actually well reflect this. Starting with the peak lightweight Elo rankings, the person at the top is Islam Makhachev, which honestly should not be that much of a surprise. Obviously, he spent most of his career here, he's beaten multiple top guys, and with this championship fight boost added in, his recent title run pushes him all the way to number 1. Right behind him though is a surprise with Tony Ferguson, which I know some people might think this is weird considering how the rest of his career went, but hey, I mean, he did have one of the craziest unbeaten streaks. Again, Elo's it's a measure of skill, so I don't really hate this ranking at all. I just find it to be interesting that he would be number 2 here. Khabib and Charles come after this too, so I mean, it all feels pretty valid in my opinion. After that, we have some longtime elite lightweight names like Cerrone, Dariush, Rafael Dos Anjos, Poirier, BJ Penn, Sarukian, Frankie Edgar, Benson Henderson, and Gaethje. And I think this is one of the better looking peak lists thus far. There are probably a few names and people that realistically you should move around, but for the most part, I don't really have any complaints. And controversially to say, I do think this is actually one of the better rankings. Charles Oliveira is currently in the number 1 spot, which does make sense because even though he's not the champion anymore, he still has a massive amount of lightweight elo built up from his title run. Arman is sitting number 2, which I think is pretty realistic considering he's built himself up and he just needs to fight a little more. Gaethje is still high as well, and then you start seeing names like Benoit Saint Denis, Max Holloway, Grant Dawson, Moyakano, Gamrot, Paddy Pimblett, and then of course we have Ilia Topuria. Right now, the Elo model has him lower in lightweight, which at first is off, of course, if you think about it. But again, that's just how the math pans out. He is obviously one of the best fighters in the world, but in terms of proven lightweight Elo specifically, he has not done enough in the division yet. And I think this is kind of the whole point of the method. It's kind of similar to Conor to me in a way. He had this great run at featherweight and then went to lightweight, but obviously the Elo hasn't reflected that yet. He still needs to do more to be considered one of the best lightweights. Moving on to welterweight, the peak rankings are actually pretty clean here too. George St. Pierre is obviously the number 1 spot, and then Usman is not too far behind him, which also feels right. After that, we have Leon Edwards, Bilal, Vicente Luque, Tyron Woodley, Maia, Matt Hughes, Lawler, Fitch, and a few others. I think overall, this is one of the most maybe realistic lists. I know for a fact people will say Leon and Bilal are a bit high, but to be honest, I don't really have much of a problem. They were both champs and, have these crazy, just win amounts and stuff like that. So the only other note I think I can think of is people may say Matt Hughes is a bit low, but that's just how the math worked out apparently here. For the current welterweight rankings, Usman is actually at the top still, which is kind of interesting considering he's not the champ anymore, but it makes sense because he built up such a huge elo amount during his run. Bilal being second is a bit interesting, but he just hasn't fought. Ian Machado Gary being third feels pretty reasonable for the division. However, the only interesting thing is Islam ranks 5th, and it's kind of the same thing with Ilia and him in the lightweight rankings at the moment. Islam just recently showed up to welterweight, but he is still basically one fight of becoming ranked 2nd, and then in 1st if Usman moves up to middleweight permanently. Overall, it's a little shaky, but welterweight I think it's solid, especially with JDM, Prates, Morales, Brady, Buckley. They're all showing up in that top 15 range, which is, where they should be. Moving on to middleweight, these peak rankings are actually pretty good too. Anderson Silva being number 1 obviously makes sense, and Izzy being right behind him also feels very right. Then you have Chris Weidman, Dricus du Plessis, Whitaker, Bisping, middleweight GSP, Brennan Allen, Imamov, Romero, and Strickland all in that upper range. So again, yeah, maybe things need to be moved around a little bit, but overall, not too bad. For the current rankings, Dricus being number 1 makes sense. He's still one of those top guys, although he, Imamov, Allen, and Strickland are literally within 1 fight of each other for the top spot, which, is to be fair, that's how real life is right now. Chimaev obviously is a little low, but hey, he's only had 4 fights at middleweight and one of them was a loss. Kind of the same, again, story between Ilia moving up, Islam moving up, and Khamzat moving up. It's just he doesn't have enough fights at middleweight to be considered one of the best middleweights ever. Moving on to light heavyweight now, the peak rankings are about what you probably would expect here too. John Jones obviously is the number 1 slot. What else do you expect? After that, you have Chuck Liddell, Glover Teixeira, Ankalaev, Rashad, Carlos Olberg, Alex Pereira, DC, Machida, Bader, And yeah, I mean, that's pretty solid. Seeing, Olberg and Ankalaev that high is a bit interesting. Pereira just being a bit lower is interesting too, but that's just how it goes. Pereira probably just doesn't have enough fights in the UFC compared to a lot of these other people. For the current rankings though, this division is actually one of the weirder ones. Carlos Olberg is number 1, and Alex Pereira is 2nd, and Ankalaev is 3rd, all within a few elo points of each other. Jan, Reyes, Mirzakhanov, Jacoby, Yuri, Rakic are all right there too. I do think Pereira being 2nd is a bit strange, but, it's not necessarily that crazy. A lot of these other guys have so many more fights on Alex Pereira, so the fact that he, doesn't have as many light heavyweight fights but is still ranked so high in light heavyweight is just, it's crazy. And finally, we have heavyweight. Francis is number 1, which makes sense considering how dominant his heavyweight UFC run is. Stipe being right behind him also feels right, since he's usually the guy people call the heavyweight GOAT in the first place. And in the number 3 spot, we have everyone's favorite, Jon Jones, which is pretty funny to me considering he only has 2 heavyweight fights, but I think it's his overall elo that carries him pretty high with this new method and everything. And then, he's still got 2 more wins here. So after that, you have Kane, JDS, Arlovsky, Volkov, Blades, Derek Lewis, Aspinall Gone, which I think is, pretty solid mix of legend and current guys. Volkov being number 1 is definitely one of the more interesting results. But I suppose it makes sense in an elo way. He's been active forever and has stacked up a lot of wins. Aspinall and Gone being right behind him also feels, very fair. And then there's Blades, Waldo, Pavlovich, Lewis, all being up there, which makes sense too. Yeah, I don't know, with those names, heavyweight is just kind of weak overall, I'm not gonna lie. Anyways, yeah, I guess that's every fighter in elo sorted by weight class now. I did enjoy experimenting with this new way of doing elo. Essentially treating each new weight class a fighter enters as independent of the previous one is pretty interesting. A lot of interesting results overall though. If you guys enjoyed this little update, make sure to like and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.